No matter how much we argue about the mysteries of the past, one of them returns to the human imagination again and again: the Holy Grail. For more than 1,000 years, it has lived in legends, inspired artists and poets, driven explorers to embark on expeditions, and urged scholars to unearth ancient archives. Why does this image hold such a powerful grip on both our hearts and minds? What is it that makes generation after generation ask the very same question? We are used to thinking of the Grail as a sacred relic, sought only by the chosen few. Somewhere far away, hidden in monastic vaults or beneath the stone arches of old castles, the mysterious cup is said to be waiting, the very vessel once touched by hands from another time. But should we really be searching for it in the outside world? Or does the true path begin within, where memory, faith, and the longing for meaning meet and intertwine? When we hear the words Holy Grail, each of us imagines something different. For some, it is the greatest Christian relic, bound to the secrets of the early centuries. For others, it is an ancient symbol from Celtic myths, promising healing and abundance. And for still others, it is a coded map of the soul's journey, where every step becomes a trial and a lesson. Yet what truly lies behind this multitude of meanings? What makes the Grail feel at once so close, yet forever out of reach? The legend of the Grail has survived the centuries. It has outlived wars, reforms, and entire shifts of worldview. Neither academic criticism nor sensational modern reinterpretations have been able to erase it. The paradox is clear. The more we try to give a definitive answer, the more the story seems to unravel into new patterns. And perhaps this is the point. The Grail resists being reduced to a single version. It lives where questions are born, slipping away from those who demand certainty. Today, I invite you on a journey where we will not rush. Step by step, we will trace the legend from its possible pre-Christian roots into Christian tradition. We will look into the medieval romances of knights and kings and see how the image of the Grail changed with the people who told its story. We will speak of symbols and archetypes, of the inner quest reflected in the hero's path. And of course, we will examine the most famous claimants to the title of the real cup, relics that for centuries have drawn both pilgrims and skeptics. One central question will guide us. It is simple to ask, but difficult to answer. Is the Grail a real object or a spiritual symbol? Are we searching for a material cup or something greater, a meaning powerful enough to transform the human heart? The answer may lie in the meeting of both horizons, for sometimes things become sacred not only because of their history, but because of what they awaken within us. This journey will not demand blind faith, nor will it impose ready-made conclusions. It will ask only for attention, curiosity, and inner honesty. We will weigh fact against myth, listen to voices from across the centuries, and, most importantly, listen to ourselves. For the Grail is not only something that may be kept in some hidden place, it is also something that guides us forward. To understand what the Grail truly is, we must journey back into the depths of time. Long before Christian Europe spoke of a holy cup, similar images appeared in Celtic mythology. Among the ancient Celts, there was a myth of a magical cauldron of abundance. This cauldron was never empty and could feed an endless number of people. Yet it was more than just a source of nourishment. It was said to heal the wounded and even bring the dead back to life. Already in this image, we see a foreshadowing of what would later become the legend of the Grail, a vessel that offers not only material sustenance, but also a touch of eternity. When Christianity spread across Europe, it began to reinterpret many of these ancient symbols through its own lens. The magical cauldron gradually transformed into the holy cup. According to one of the most well-known versions, this was the very chalice from which Christ drank on the night of the Last Supper with his disciples. Later, after the crucifixion, legend tells that Joseph of Arimathea used this same cup to collect the blood of the Savior. In this way, an ordinary vessel was turned into the greatest relic, a bridge between the earthly and the divine, between life and death, sacrifice and salvation. Medieval Europe, in particular, was enchanted by such stories. In the romances of the knights, the Grail took on a new form. It became intertwined with the legends of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Here, the Grail was no longer simply a cup. It was the goal of a sacred quest. Only the chosen one, pure in heart and thought, could find and behold it. One such hero was Parzival, the knight whose story revealed that true worth is born not from the strength of weapons, but from the strength of the spirit. Step by step, the image of the Grail changed with the people and the times. For some, it remained a Christian relic. For others, a knightly dream. For still others, a mystical symbol. Each era added its own details, turning the legend into a living stream that could never be stopped. Perhaps this is the secret of the Grail itself. It was never a frozen symbol. It has constantly renewed itself, finding resonance in human hearts, because it expressed their deepest longings. Some searched for a miracle in the material world, others in spiritual depths. Yet all were united by one belief, that there is something greater than everyday life, and that it can somehow be touched. When we hear the word Grail, we imagine a cup that can be held in one's hands. But for millions of people, it has never been merely an object. It is a symbol, and it is precisely this symbolic power that has made it eternal. In Christian tradition, the Grail was understood as a vessel of divine grace. It was said to contain the blood of Christ, the sign of sacrifice and redemption. Those who sought the Grail were not pursuing a simple cup, but rather an encounter with the eternal light, with the source capable of filling the soul. For a believer, the Grail became a bridge between heaven and earth, between the human and the divine. Yet the meaning of the Grail extended far beyond religion. In the Arthurian legends, it became a test of the soul. Only one who purified his heart of pride and selfishness, who could discern the true from the false, was worthy to find it. In other words, the search for the Grail mirrored the inner journey. Every knight who set out to find it was, in truth, searching for himself, for his truth and for his connection with the divine. Alchemists and mystics of the Middle Ages saw in the Grail a symbol of transformation. For them, it was not only a vessel, but also the very process of human transfiguration. The alchemical philosopher's stone, which turned base metals into gold, reflected the same principle. The Grail was the vessel in which the human soul underwent trials and, through purification, became radiant and immortal. Even modern psychology has not ignored this image. The renowned thinker Carl Gustav Jung regarded the Holy Grail as an archetype, a universal symbol that lives within the collective unconscious. For Jung, the Grail embodied humanity's longing for wholeness and self-realization. To speak of the quest for the Grail is to speak of the soul's deep desire to find harmony, meaning, and healing. Thus, the Grail becomes the image of a path, the path of every human being. It is not merely a relic or a piece of history. It is a sign that we always have the chance to seek and to find something greater. The Grail lives wherever a person dares to ask, "Who am I? Why am I here? And what is truth?" If the symbolic meaning of the Grail provided food for thought to philosophers and mystics, the idea that it might be a real cup kept adventurers, knights, pilgrims, and scholars restless for centuries. Again and again, people set out on quests to find this sacred relic, believing that even touching it could bring both spiritual and physical healing. As early as the Middle Ages, certain places became associated with the Grail. They were called sites of power. Monasteries, castles, and mountain shrines turned into points of attraction for pilgrims. There, cups and vessels were displayed as the Grail itself. Sometimes these were beautiful legends created to enhance the prestige of a monastery and draw believers. Yet in other cases, traditions were handed down so persistently from generation to generation that even scholars began to wonder. Perhaps there was some fragment of truth behind them. One of the most famous relics is the chalice kept in Valencia Cathedral. Local tradition claims that it could have been used at the Last Supper. Made of dark stone and adorned with gold, the cup has never been officially recognized by the Catholic Church as authentic. Still, several popes have celebrated Mass with it. For the faithful, this alone has become a powerful sign of veneration. Another relic is found in Genoa. In the Cathedral of St. Lawrence, a green vessel made of Eastern stone has long been displayed. Legend says it was brought back from the East by the Templars. In the 17th century, it was accidentally broken, and today only fragments set in a frame remain. Yet despite this, fascination with the relic has not faded. There is also the legend of Montségur, the Cathar stronghold in southern France. The Cathars were condemned as heretics and brutally wiped out, but rumors that they were the keepers of the Holy Grail live on. According to tradition, before the fall of the fortress in 1244, a great artifact was secretly carried away. No one knows what it was, but for many seekers it has been enough to ignite a belief that the Grail's trail might still be found there. Secret societies hold a special place in these stories. The Templars, that order forever shrouded in mystery, were often linked to the Grail. It was said that they protected it and passed down secret knowledge from generation to generation. Later, the Rosicrucians and other mystical brotherhoods were added to the tale, claiming to see in the Grail a key to higher wisdom. Curiously, in some theories, the Grail ceases to be a cup at all. One interpretation suggests that the Grail is not an object, but a person or even a bloodline. According to this view, the Grail represents the blood of Christ, carried on through his descendants. This idea gained wide popularity in recent decades, especially after the novel The Da Vinci Code, in which the Grail appears not as a vessel, but as a hidden lineage, a mystery preserved in history. In this way, the search for the Grail has always been more than a hunt for an ancient object. It has been a yearning to touch the mystery, to find a bridge between the earthly and the divine, and whether or not it has ever truly been found, the very idea of the quest has inspired generations and carried them forward. If we look at human history more broadly, we find that the image of a cup or vessel of life appears in many different cultures and religions. This is no surprise, for the vessel has always been a symbol of that which holds and transmits power, whether food, water, or spiritual energy. The legend of the Grail is but one variation of this ancient and profound idea. In Christian tradition, the Grail became the holy chalice directly linked to Christ. It united two of the greatest events, the Last Supper and the Passion of the Cross. For believers, the Grail was a symbol of sacrifice and redemption, a sign of divine grace that one might touch. This is why the quest for the Grail was seen as a journey to the very source of faith. Yet when we step beyond Christianity, we uncover older roots. Among the Celts, there were myths of cauldrons that granted immortality, healing, and abundance. These myths may well have laid the foundation for the later Grail legends, when Christian Europe reinterpreted ancient tales in a new light. For the Celts, the cauldron was not simply an object. It was a container of power that could only be accessed in a special spiritual state. The legend of the Grail has left a vast imprint on European culture. It inspired writers and artists, became the subject of paintings, poems, and epics. The medieval romances of knights in search of the Grail were not merely entertaining tales, but parables of spiritual trials. Even in modern times, and into our own century, the Grail continues to appear in books and films, because it reflects humanity's eternal longing for mystery and for light. It is fascinating to note that similar images exist in the East. In Hinduism and Buddhism, we encounter vessels filled with amrita, the nectar of immortality. These, too, were considered sources of strength, blessing, and spiritual enlightenment. In Buddhist tradition, the vessel often symbolized the accumulation of wisdom and compassion. Thus, the idea of a sacred vessel does not belong to any one culture. It is universal, familiar to nearly all of humanity. All of this shows that the Grail is not merely a European legend. It is part of the great, shared symbolism of humankind. It expresses our longing for the source of life, for immortality, for truth. And it is precisely this universality that makes it eternal. One might think that the legend of the Grail should have remained in the Middle Ages, among knights and monks. Yet, in a remarkable way, it continues to live on even today. In fact, interest in it has only grown stronger in recent decades. Today, the search for the Grail takes place not only in ancient manuscripts and monastic chronicles, but also in archaeological excavations, in scholarly theories, and even in popular books and films. Archaeologists have repeatedly tried to trace this relic. Across different parts of Europe, cups, vessels, and artifacts have been discovered and proclaimed to be the Grail. Some of them are still preserved in cathedrals and museums, but none has gained absolute recognition. And yet, each new discovery rekindles fascination and raises the timeless question, what if the true cup really is hidden somewhere? Modern theories often interpret the Grail not literally, but symbolically. One of the most famous is the idea that the Grail is not a cup at all, but the bloodline of Christ. Popularized by books and films such as the Da Vinci Code, this interpretation suggests that the Grail represents not a vessel, but blood, meaning the descendants of Jesus, whose secret was allegedly concealed from the world. Controversial as it may be, this view made millions look at the legend in a completely new way. Another theory claims that the Grail is an ancient esoteric symbol encoded in the very architecture of Europe's great cathedrals. Some researchers suggest that Gothic cathedrals were designed as a kind of map, transmitting hidden knowledge through their proportions, stained glass, and sculptures. In this sense, the Grail was not an object, but an entire space of spiritual initiation. Nor should we forget the modern pilgrims. Even today, people set out on journeys hoping to come closer to the Grail. Some travel to Valencia to see the chalice in the cathedral. Others head to the castles of the Cathars, or the ruins of ancient fortresses where legend says the relic may have been hidden. For some, it is a matter of historical curiosity. For others, it is a spiritual quest. For the journey itself becomes a symbol of encounter with mystery. Thus, in our own time, the Grail lives on in many dimensions. It remains a relic for the faithful, a puzzle for scholars, an inspiration for writers, and a symbol of the path for those seeking the spiritual. And therein lies its strength. It can take on many forms, yet always remain meaningful. The legend of the Holy Grail has accompanied humanity for more than 1,000 years. Born from the weaving of myth and faith, it has changed with eras and cultures, yet it has never lost its power. In every century, it has found new listeners and new seekers, because it speaks to what is most essential, the human longing to find the source of light, truth, and immortality. Much debate has surrounded the question of whether the Grail was ever a real object. Perhaps somewhere a cup connected to the earliest days of Christianity is still hidden. Perhaps one day archaeologists will uncover evidence that confirms or denies this. But even if that day never comes, the legend of the Grail will not vanish. For its true strength lies not in stone or in gold, but in what it awakens within us. For some, the Grail is a sacred relic tied to Christ and his sacrifice. For others, it is a symbol of the inner journey, a path toward purification and self-knowledge. For still others, it is an archetype held in the collective memory of humanity, reminding us of our longing for wholeness. And none of these versions cancels out the others. Perhaps the Grail is both symbol and artifact at once, a bridge between the material and the spiritual, between history and the inner experience. The greatest meaning of the Grail is that it calls us to seek. It reminds us that life is not limited to the everyday, that beyond the horizon of the ordinary there is always mystery, a mystery that inspires, strengthens, and points the way. And perhaps the true Grail is something each of us carries within, a yearning for truth, a desire to touch eternity. Every generation sets out toward its own Grail. Every person walks a unique path, with unique trials and discoveries. And perhaps this is the deepest truth. The Grail is not so much an object as it is a mirror of the soul. It reflects what we are searching for, and becomes whatever we are ready to see in it. So let this search never end. Let it lead us toward light, harmony, and the understanding that true treasures are always closer than we think. For the path to the Grail is, in the end, the path to ourselves.